It's time for another full conditions roundup, as my previous video was only fairly brief. So we're in the final week of July now, which is statistically speaking the peak of summer. End of July, start of August is when you generally speaking expect to find hottest temperatures in this part of the world. But thankfully, we've not yet had a return to the extreme crazy heat that we had back in June. We had the occasional very hot day, but no sustained heat and therefore no heat wave. That high heat is still here in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, but it's just moved a bit further north and a bit further east. So over the last 2 or 3 weeks in Scandinavia, they've been having record-breaking temperatures up there. And indeed, further south and east in Europe and Anatolia as well, it's also incredibly hot. But thankfully here in Central and Western Europe, it's basically normal temperatures at the moment. Indeed, often it's actually a little bit below average temperatures. We've had some snow down to kind of relatively modest levels. The overarching theme of the last few weeks has been for some very changeable weather, really. Yes, like I say, there has been some very hot days. There have been some weather windows, but they've been few and far between. As such, not many people have been actually managing to get out up high very often and manage to do any of the really big alpine routes. The weather windows have just been too short. And in terms of the high alpine conditions, we're in a little bit of the worst of both worlds, conditions-wise at the moment. The heat wave back in June basically ended it for all the mixed climbing. That destroyed most of the perennial snowpack, and all the glaciers and everything are in a really bad state. But with this quite wet, stormy weather we've been having, there's been quite a lot of fresh snow. It melts relatively quickly, but it's enough to be problematic and prevent you from getting out on some of the rock routes immediately after snowfall. So while pure rock routes are very much still the name of the game, you have to be patient, pick your days and wait for things to dry if you do want to get out. And while this cooler, wetter weather has generally slowed down the rate of collapse of the high mountains, the mountains are still falling down. The damage has been done. There's still been some big rockfalls and some big glacial collapses happening. So there was a big rockfall on the west face of the Guy Noir de Putri, which is part of the Putri Integral. It's not somewhere that many people will visit because it's a pretty hard place. All the climbing up there is pretty tough. But yeah, people who are thinking of doing the Putri Integral or any of the rock routes on the Guy Noir, bear in mind that anything associated with the west face could well be damaged by that rockfall. And of course there's still serac collapses, avalanches and ice collapses on glaciers as well. There was another fairly big collapse near the Ganella Hut, which is also on the south side of Mont Blanc. While any fresh snow does help to bind any of the loose, sandy, gravelly stuff together and make some of the chossy gullies a little bit less chossy, it's not really repairing the permafrost. The permafrost is still melting, so big towers and big blocks are still unstable, even though there's a little bit of glue effectively sticking the loose, gravelly stuff together on top. So of course, you do still need to be careful. Even on routes which are once thought to be stable, things are much less stable now than they were 10-15 years ago. Things are still falling down. As for the conditions on some of the other big alpine routes, broadly speaking the conditions on the Dom de Miage and the Guy Bénassi, which is the start of the Royal Traverse, up there in the clouds somewhere, is still pretty damn good. It's continuous snow crest most of the way along. There's very little in the way of exposed ice, and any of the rock sections are all still, broadly speaking, pretty solid. So yeah, in terms of getting up Mont Blanc, doing the Royal Traverse is probably still your best bet because that section is still in good condition. As for the Goutte route itself on Mont Blanc, some fresh snow is going to improve things slightly on the Grand Couloir, but even so, if you are doing it any time that the sun's out, you're still going to get loose stuff coming down, so you still need to be very careful. In terms of big rockfalls, there's not been anything reported recently, but there's always still constantly small stuff coming down, so yeah. You need to cross early or cross when it's shady, really. And as for the Trois Monts, the fixed rope, which was crossing the Bergstrand on Mont Mordy, has now gone, which does mean that you now need 2 axes to be able to get up and down that section. It's very much a big gaping crack now. And as for some of the delicate snow bridges on Mont Blanc de Tacle, they are still passable, it is still going, but again, they are delicate. Especially if you're crossing later in the afternoon, you need to be very careful. And again, especially if you've not come up that way, you're just going down that way. You don't necessarily know where the weak snow bridges are because you can't always see them from above, whereas you would have got a better view coming up from below. So yeah, people are still tracing the Trois Monts route up and down, and indeed just doing the normal route of Mont Blanc de Tacle. It does still pass, but you just need to be careful and be aware. And on to the Arête Kufner and Arête de Derbe. Despite the fact that I was reporting weeks ago that it was over for them, they're already out of condition. People still have been getting up them and getting out and onto them in recent weeks, thanks in part to the recent snowfall and colder temperatures, but also people are just risking it really. So as for the Kufner Arête, the Bergstrand now is absolutely huge. It's impassable anywhere along its length. The only way over it is on the rocks to its far left, but that requires about a 10-50 metre pitch of pretty steep, pretty technical rock climbing to get on and up above onto the snow slope. So it looks pretty terrifying, and to be honest, generally best avoided unless you are very, very confident that kind of climbing. Once on the arete itself, much of it is now dry, but then there's also fresh and consolidated snowfall on it, which is again the worst of both worlds. So a team has got up it recently, kept their crampons on the whole way, but yeah, it's pretty much unhelpful snow on loose rock still, so it's definitely best avoided. As for the erected diab, remarkably, apparently the Bergstrand is still passable and relatively straightforward. Again, the approach couloir is very chossy, very dry. It may well be held together a little bit by some of the fresh snow, but again, that's not really making a huge difference. And again, fresh snow is what you don't want once you're on the arete. You want all the climbing itself to be bone dry rock. So to be honest, again, it's the worst of both worlds right now. But like I say, people have still been doing it. There's not been any recent reports of major rockfall on the approach up to the Dent de Gionne and Rochefort arete. Again, the colder temperatures have helped there, and a little bit of fresh snow has stabilised things slightly. But again, you always need to be aware at this time of year, especially if you're descending later in the day when it's in the strong sun. Some teams have been attempting the Jurassic Traverse as well, but the fresh snow is going to make that much more difficult now. You want dry rock on the technical rock crux, and as it's north facing, it's going to stay wet and cold and icy for much longer. So it's going to take a good few days again for that to dry out after this next bout of stormy weather has finally passed. But on the plus side, the descent is still okay, at least it was as of a week ago. Not much in the way of bare ice, and most of the crevasses are still very much passable. And at least one team has also made it up the Hirondale Ridge and then also down the descent route in the last week or so between the bad weather as well. As you might expect, the easy classics up there, the Entrev, Marbre, Cosmic Arete, etc. are all incredibly busy. It is very much peak summer season now. So your biggest danger on those routes is probably other people. And of course the rockfall that those people cause, but yeah, there's long queues on all the cruxy steps and waiting for the abseils and that kind of thing. So to be honest, unless you're a complete beginner, it's best to avoid those routes at this time of year. The glaciers for approaching and descending off of the rock routes on the Petit Jurasse are still reportedly also okay. All the Bergstrands are still passable, and again, there's not too many problematic crevasses at the moment. I'm very excited to have been sent these funky sunglasses by Outdoor Master ahead of their release this summer. So these are the Lark SV, they'll be coming out fairly soon I imagine. And on first impressions, they've got incredible clarity in these lenses. Granted, I've not sweated onto them yet, but yeah, so far they've got amazing clarity of vision through them. Yeah, it's outstanding really. And stylistically, they're suitably bold and loud and proud to suit my preferences too. And as a reminder, I have a discount code with Outdoor Master which works across their range. Everything from their ski helmets and goggles, sunglasses, bike gear, swimming gear, SUP gear, paddleboarding, etc. The lot. So yeah, if you're after any of those sorts of things, I highly recommend checking out their website. My discount code currently set at 15%. So yeah, it makes already great value products even cheaper. There is still a pretty good boot track along the Midi-Plan Traverse. The Chossy couloir halfway along is of course a Chossy couloir now, but with these slightly cooler temperatures it's not too bad. It's still very much passable, and yeah, no one's been having too many difficulties along there recently. As for the rock routes on the Envers des Aigris sector, the rockfall that I reported on in one of my previous videos, which has affected the approach for the Guide de la Republique and the Mur de Glace face to the Grepon, is still active. Stuff is still coming down, so that sector is also still best avoided. But further along, most of the other rock routes are still perfectly good at this time of year, and most of the Bergstrands still pass. Up in the Latour Basin, the Guide de Tour is still a viable option, especially the Table Arete. Table couloir itself now is very much dry from the midpoint upwards, but you can access the rock to get up onto the Table Arete without too much difficulties. And again, descending the Voie Normale and crossing the Bergstrand there is also doable without too many difficulties. I've had no confirmation of this, but I fully expect that it's over for the Chardonnay now. Judging by how big some of the Bergstrands and crevasses were in my previous report, they're only gotten a lot worse since then. So yeah, I can't imagine there's too many people attempting things on the Chardonnay at the moment, but maybe I'm wrong. And I can't imagine there's too much action going on in the Argentière Basin anymore either, other than for the pure rock routes directly behind the hut. Yeah, I'd imagine for Guide d'Argentière itself it's very much over at this time of year, and definitely any of the mixed routes on the east and north faces across the other side of the glacial basin. A day or so after I was on the Lagenhorn recently, one of my friends did the Taschhorn Dom Traverse, which is just across the valley above Saas-Fee, and she said that the traverse of the Taschhorn itself, conditions were acceptable. Yes, it's a bit chossy. Most of the Swiss 1000ers are chossy, but it was acceptable levels of choss on that ridge. Then traversing between Taschhorn and up towards the Dom, so the north ridge of the Dom, it was horrifically bad, she said. The worst rock conditions she's ever seen. So yeah, it sounds like it's very ill-advised attempting to do the full Taschhorn Dom Traverse, unfortunately. If you are trying to tick both those summits, it's better doing the Dom from the other side. And then also worth noting that as they were descending around about 4 PM on the glacier below the Dom, she fell through into a hidden crevasse. They were roped up, so she was perfectly fine, got out no problems, but yeah, just goes to show that you can never be complacent when up on the glaciers. Even when you can't see any crevasses, they're still there lurking underneath the snow. And of course right now, especially late in the afternoon, the snow bridges are very weak, so yeah, very worth bearing in mind. If you need to book an airport transfer, then look no further than Mountain Drop-Offs. Definitely one of the best and most reliable transfer companies in the valley. You can find out more about their availability using the QR code here or the link in the description. And if you're struggling to find alpine partners or climbing partners or paragliding partners or just want to make outdoor buddies, I'd highly recommend joining the Oak app. A great place to find and meet new people who have very similar hobbies, interests and most importantly, skill level to you. So yeah, you can also check that out through the QR code here or the link in the description. It's worth bearing in mind that with the stormy weather that we've been seeing right across the Alps recently, lots of roads and paths and that kind of thing have been getting washed out and flooded in both the mid and lower mountain as well. So it's not just being affected up in the high mountains. So if you are just going for a hike on a bad weather day, just yeah, bear in mind that the path that you're looking for might actually not be there. And indeed, if you're doing things like the Tour de Mont Blanc, Hope Route, etc., some of these long distance paths, sections are proving to be problematic at the moment because of the crazy storms that we've been seeing across the Alps. And this stormy weather is set to continue until at least Monday next week, perhaps beyond as well. But for now, certainly it looks to be pretty wet until at least Monday. Indeed, Sunday and Monday, freezing levels are coming right back down again as well. We could well see some snow down to mid-mountain levels again. But yeah, fingers crossed from Tuesday onwards. Next week is looking better, looking more promising. No return to the heat wave just yet, but yeah, a bit more stable weather is hopefully on its way from Tuesday onwards. If that does pan out, then later on next week, conditions in the high alpine could actually end up being pretty good. All the fresh snow we would have seen this last week or so. Some places would have seen over 50 centimetres of snow, above 3,500 metres potentially. And yeah, after that's had a couple of days to consolidate and melt down a bit, refreeze overnight hopefully, we could actually see some reasonably good alpine conditions on many of the high alpine ridges. So yeah, that's worth bearing in mind that if that does come to pass, it could well be pretty good later next week. But in the short term, as I was saying earlier, it's going to take a while for the snow to melt on many of the ledges and many of the cracks, etc., even on south-facing routes up high. So you're going to need a bit of patience if you are out next week. Wait a few days to melt back all the snow and make things passable again. Personally, I've not actually managed to get out in the high mountains since I was on the Lagenhorn during my last video. This very changeable weather has put paid to several of my plans over the last week or so. So fingers crossed, later next week I'll be able to get up high and get out again and reignite my summer alpine objectives.